Welcome to The Chemical Show, the podcast where chemical means business. I'm your host, Victoria Meyer, bringing you stories and insights from leaders driving innovation and growth across the chemical industry. Each week, we explore key trends, real-world challenges, and the strategies that make an impact. Let's get started. Hi, welcome back to The Chemical Show. So today's episode is a compilation of interviews that I had with the risk professionals at Marsh. So I was recently at Marsh's North American Energy and Power Symposium and had the opportunity to interview a number of great leaders and executives from Marsh and Mercer, both part of the same parent company, talking about risk and risk management and what they see on the horizon for 2025 and beyond, and what's critical to industry leaders to understand. So we will be covering things regarding talent, environmental risk, supply chain risk, and more. Stay tuned and enjoy this episode. Hi, I am here with Steve Horstkamp, who is Marsh's U.S. chemical practice leader. And so first of all, Steve, thank you for making arrangements to get me to be part of your symposium. This has been really a great experience.
Oh, Victoria, thank you for coming. We're excited that you're here and able to witness what our clients get out of this, because there's so much collaboration.
It's really come through, because really part of the value is in being together, in having these conversations, and in learning.
The value is getting people to connect. After the ideas are shared on the stage, getting people to talk about them, explore their thoughts with their peers and with their clients, for example, or their peers, their partners, their brokers.
So important. So it's really cool. So Steve, let's talk a little bit about you in your role at Marsh. What do you do within Marsh and the chemical practice?
So I lead the chemical practice, as you said. Chemical risks are unique and they're different from others. And so our industry organization makes sure that we have specialists that can help companies assess either their financial risks, their operational risks, their legal risks, and their reputational risks, and help to lay those out to make sure that leaders and boards of directors are aware of what they're facing and steps that they can do to mitigate those kinds of risks.
What are the key trends and drivers that chemical companies are facing today?
Some of the key trends, we can't include all of them here, but certainly the macroeconomic conditions that are causing companies to reevaluate their portfolios in a strategic way. Digital transformation, cyber risks that are starting to crop up and becoming evident. There's talent, right? Talent is always top of mind for chemical industry, and rail is another big issue. Shipping, supply chain, as you've said, right? The decade of supply.
It is the decade of supply chain, absolutely.
That's also a big risk, and we're seeing it from the port strike that was just seemingly averted today, to shipments by rail of clients that really are being asked to carry a lot more liability than they have been in the past.
Yeah. Companies are facing a lot of different things. I am speaking with Susan Gonzales, who is the managing director for Marsh, based here in Houston, and one of the leaders of the North American Summit that we're here at today. So super great conversations that have been taking place already this past day, and Susan brings a lot of energy and leadership to the energy practice and to Marsh. So Susan, really excited to speak with you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just start with a little bit about you. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and what you do at Marsh?
Sure. So the easy part is I'm the head of the Houston office, and I'm also the leader for the energy practice, leading the property and the casualty brokers as well as the service team.
Awesome. And tell us maybe a little bit more about what Marsh does in this space, because we haven't really talked yet about, who is Marsh and what is your role with energy and power companies?
Yes, so Marsh really works as, in the insurance and the risk space, we work as an advisor to our clients. And, the nuts and bolts of it really comes in the transactional piece of it, where we're placing their insurance that they need for whether it's property, casualty, financial lines, environmental, all the different things. That's really the nuts and bolts of it, because you have to have a policy, you have to have your contracts, things like that. But also, we want to be a consultant to our clients to make sure that they understand what's on the forefront. We want to understand their business really well to see how they want their business to evolve, and that we're preparing for the risks that could be associated with that, so that they're not getting to that final transaction if they're making an acquisition, for example, and then saying, oh my goodness, we need this kind of things to be compliant.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the challenges, of course, as a business leader is figuring out where to apply limited resources, because every company and every leader ultimately has limited resources to figure out what those priority areas are. And you guys have hit on a lot of priority areas, right? And so I think that's also maybe just the opportunity and the challenge. Is that an area that your team helps with as well in terms of prioritizing where maybe some bigger or lesser risks are and what approaches need to be taken today versus a year from now?
Yes. Yeah. And I'd say that like some of the life lessons that were learned from the conference this week is there's a lot to be learned from collaboration. And where we do the best as Marsh, engaging with our clients, is where they allow us to have influence over the multiple departments that you may need to collaborate together to come up with solutions. For example, Rob Lee mentioned that you can't just have your IT department who's really working on systems, maybe administrative things, versus the operational side of the technology.
Right.
Those divisions have to talk to each other. We can get the finance groups and the legal groups to integrate and talk to each other when that risk manager or that organization really allows us to help speak each other's language and connect the dots.
Hi, I am with Milan Taylor, who is the Global Head of Energy and Chemicals for Mercer. Milan led a really great panel earlier today talking about talent and more across the energy and chemical industries. Milan, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to invite me onto your show.
Absolutely. So tell us just a little bit about yourself, what got you into this role, what you do with Mercer.
So Mercer is a very large people risk consulting firm, and my role as the global energy and chemicals leader is to work with our colleagues and our clients to resolve for some of the most complex issues as businesses transform.
Yeah, awesome. And I know that you've recently done a survey of global HR leaders talking about what the enterprise challenges are for 2025. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we spoke to 25 senior HR leaders across the energy and chemical industry and said, as they look to 2025, what are those key enterprise challenges? Number one, it's all about cost management. So not a surprise, I think, from the chemical industry perspective. So it's about optimization. It's about ensuring that the dollars are spent well. So key focus there. At the same breath, it was, and we need to grow as well, right? So it's the flip side of the same coin. So focus on cost management, focus on growth. And then the third key priority for the year is all about simplification. So I think that's a tacit recognition that processes are over-engineered, over-complicated, and so it's about going back to your roots of keeping it simple but delivering safely. So a pretty big enterprise agenda for the year.
So Milan, those seem like three priorities that maybe work against each other. Is that true, or how do you see those two working together?
Yeah, look, I think that the chemical industry it's all about coming out of its down cycle. It's all about ensuring that current shareholders and stakeholders are rewarded, and it's about ensuring that the businesses, as they transform themselves, have that sustainability to deliver. So I guess that the cost management is about delivering today, the growth is about delivering today, and simplification is making sure that they can deliver in the coming years as well. So I see them as pretty complementary themes.
And how do you see people tackling that? Like if you think about recommendations that you and Mercer are bringing to the table with your clients, what does simplification mean in this environment?
Yeah, so as you look through the lens of people, this expresses itself through talent.
Okay.
And I think the simplification side is, let's look at the way we hire people, right? Are there ways that we can cut out duplicative processes? Are there ways we can ensure that we hire more quickly so we can deliver more effectively to the organizations? It's looking at taking on AI. Can we actually adopt AI? And can that augment what we're trying to do as an organization? So there's a whole scale review of how businesses operate through the lens of people risk. So those are just some of the things that organizations are thinking about in 25.
Right. Hi, I am here with Amy Barnes, who is the head of climate and sustainability for Marsh globally, and she's leading some really engaging discussions here at the symposium on climate and climate adaptation and probably a few other things. So we're going to be talking about that today. Amy, thanks for joining me.
Delighted to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about climate adaptation, because I know that's a big topic of conversation this week. What does that mean exactly, and what are you guys doing about it?
Okay, well, to say to everybody that this week we're in the middle of the Palisade fire in California. Absolutely devastating event, devastating for so many people personally. And if you listen to any of the newscasters or the politicians who are speaking, they are saying that this is an unprecedented event. And that is what we're thinking about when we think about climate adaptation. We are thinking about changes in extreme weather. It can be torrential rain that gives rise to more extreme flooding than we've seen before. It can be the droughts. If we think back to 2021, we saw the droughts in the Mississippi River and cargo not able to leave the US because of a lack of water. It can be Milton Helene coming further inland than we've ever seen before, and areas who haven't been exposed to hurricane-force winds before. So how are organisations adapting to changes in extreme weather and making sure that their organisations are resilient and can thrive in those environments?
Yeah. And how does Marsh play into this then?
The most obvious place that we start is thinking about physical assets. We're probably known best for insuring people's property, so that physical asset damage. And that's what a lot of people do when they think about climate change. They think about, how is my asset going to be impacted? Am I going to be more susceptible to flood? Do I need to worry about wind? But we're expanding that conversation. We say even within your site, there's more that you need to think about. You need to think about your asset and how you protect that. You really need to think about your people, because people are exposed to climate change. Now, there's more risk. There's risk on site and there's risk at home. So if I give credit to one of US construction companies, Turner Construction, they did a really interesting piece of research last year looking at their employees during a heat stress event. And they found that their employees were consistently turning up to work dehydrated. Now, when you're dehydrated, your judgment is impaired and you start to make mistakes.
Starting the day that way.
Starting that way on a back foot.
Can't be good.
So more forklift trucks crash. You have more incidents and accidents because of that. So they can have small interventions like putting up hydration stations as soon as people get into the office and say, it's hot out there, have a drink before you start work. Really small, low-cost interventions. So thinking about the people within your footprint as well. Yeah. But we also need to think about emergency response. So if the worst does happen in extreme weather, can you do the things that you thought you could do? I referred to the Palisades fire earlier, and we're already seeing they don't have water where they need it. And so can we still respond to an event? You could have a fire. It doesn't need to be a fire caused by a wildfire. You could have an ordinary explosion at a site, but in a drought scenario, will you still have access to water to control that fire? Yeah. So we help clients think about all those things within their footprint, but there's more. Yeah. Assets don't operate in isolation. No. They operate within a wider system. So how are companies thinking about their vulnerabilities to exposures in the supply chain? So in the supply chain, the food and beverage industry are really thinking very deeply about this already, because anyone in agriculture is very weather exposed. And people who particularly like chocolate, who are listening to your podcast, last year was a really bad year for cocoa crops.
I've heard that.
And so
recently, I'm like, what the heck? I need my chocolate.
Exactly, and it's harder to find, and certainly the prices are going up. Chocolate isn't hard to find, relax. And so how are you thinking about those climate vulnerabilities? And some of the works that we've done with clients in that industry are saying, will we still be able to say made with 100% Italian Durham wheat or made with 100% Italian tomatoes because the changing climate? And there was a client in Florida, don't ask me for a date, some years ago, and part of their USP is made from 100% Florida orange juice. That year there weren't Florida oranges. They had to go to Mexico. Their whole branding strategy has changed. So supply chain is one thing. If we think about infrastructure, in the intro I talked about the Mississippi River.
Yeah. Panama Canal was a big issue last year with a lack of water and lack of rain. Yeah.
Hang on, you're not a climate expert and you're telling me about all these climate impacts.
I do know chemicals and shipping.
No, but that's my point. It's affecting everyone everywhere. That what dependencies do you have on infrastructure? So we've got the shipping industries and the connectivity. We've also got power. Could your power supply be disrupted because of climate change? And then there's water. Now, every industry on the planet uses water for manufacturing, and especially chemical industries.
Absolutely.
So one of the things when we think about water scarcity, we often think about the farmers. But did you know that in Taiwan, for the past 3 years, the government have been paying farmers not to plant rice so they have enough water to make semiconductors?
No.
I don't think many people are realizing that our high-tech industries have got these extreme water dependencies that we're not factoring in.
Yes.
So we're helping clients to understand. And there are more factors in the ecosystem as well. So the work that we're doing, and I work with loads of really good colleagues in the US who help our clients to understand, first of all, their risk, because insurance is just one risk treatment. The first thing we need to do is understand the risks so we can measure it, we can make interventions, we can reduce our risk, and then insurance becomes the next form of intervention.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right, so I am here with Randal Waters, who is the SVP of the Emerging Risk Groups in Charlotte. And Randal and I have been having a really great conversation about some of the emerging risks and how, frankly, the unexpected things that become risk, right? Which I guess is the whole point of it being emerging. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that and more. So Randal, thanks for joining me. So we're going to focus in a little bit on supply chain. But before we do, emerging risks, that could be a bit of everything. So what falls into that category?
Yeah, when I think about emerging risks, there's maybe two categories or two ways of thinking about it. One is you have the things that are really net new, and if we think about the way that AI is starting to change things, generative AI, that's an emerging risk for everyone. Then there are other things like climate change, cyber risk, geopolitical risk that are maybe not necessarily net new, but are emerging in the sense that they're dynamic and the way they're impacting organizations is evolving rapidly, right? And so we think of them in that category of emerging risk and needing different treatment than maybe more traditional risks like pure like natural catastrophe issues that are kind of known and understood.
Yeah, makes sense. That's interesting. So Steve, I've been asking your colleagues, and I'm going to ask you the same question. If there was one place, one action that chemical leaders should take as we start 2025, what would that be?
There's so many, and I think to summarize what I'm thinking about the chemical leader should do is don't let 2025 stand in the way of your next 5 years, because the planning that has to be done now to continue to evolve and continue to respond to the different conditions that are there is going to be hard. 2025, of course, there's going to be pressure to perform as always in every year, but don't let that stop you from looking to the future.
And so, if you were meeting with a chemical industry leader tomorrow, which maybe you will be, what's the advice that you would give them as they sit here at the beginning of 2025 when they're thinking about their business and their risks and their risk portfolio?
I think every CEO, CFO has on their mind, how are we going to grow? Because we're all charged with that.
Yep.
Everybody,
including
me. How are we going to find talent and take care of the talent that we have? And what's on the horizon? So I would say if I was sitting with one right now, it's like, what's keeping you up at night in those three categories? And there's different ways that MMC, not just Marsh, but Marsh is within the umbrella of MMC. There's different ways that we can approach that and help them analyze it, help them figure out what the solutions are, the pros and cons to those different solutions, and prepare them not just for the moment, but again, for the future.
Yeah, awesome. So if you were going to advise a business leader to do one thing related to their people in 2025, what would it be?
So organizations need to have a really effective employee value proposition. Why work for the organization? For that C-suite, I would say ensure that the say and the do are aligned. Because younger employees walking in, being sold on a promise that isn't delivered, will be walking right out your door.
If you were advising a chemical executive on, sitting here today or tomorrow when you go back to your day job, what's one thing they can be doing and should be doing or thinking about here in 2025 as it relates to energy transition risk, et cetera?
Yeah, I think I would say it always depends on who we're talking to and what their issues are. Every single one of our clients presents different issues, but at a high level, for the chemical industry, I would say probably one of the most important things that they could be doing, particularly executives, is exactly what Peter Huntsman did yesterday. We have to be communicating across in a multi-dimensional fashion. It is not enough to stay in the chemical industry bubble and just talk about these things. What Huntsman did yesterday was tell a bunch of traditional energy companies, including companies that are making their living building solar and wind and creating problems ultimately for him. He said what he said, and he got that word out. And I think the more that executives in what I'll say is energy adjacent industries appreciate the complexity of the situation, the better informed we'll be when we tell policymakers what it is we're looking for.
So if there was one thing, and there's a lot of things that you covered here, if there was one thing that you recommend to business leaders that you work with to do as it relates to climate in 2025, what would it be? Where would they start?
So if I think about what good looks like for me personally in my career, good for me personally in my career means making sure my boss never has a surprise. And so I think make sure you don't have surprises. Do the work now to anticipate the changes that can come so you can start to plan for them. No business has the capex to respond to all of these issues straight away. We can't make those changes straight away, but at least have in your drawer a plan that says these are the changes that could affect us. So when you're making capex decisions, you're making capex decisions with that knowledge in the background, so you're starting to do things smartly. So I would say get prepared so you're in the best possible position to avoid surprises.
So Randal, for the chemical leaders listening to this, if there was one thing they could do in this space of either emerging risk or supply chain, where would they start in 2025?
Again, great question. I think they've probably done a lot of horizon scanning and have a sense for what risks are out there, but it's really putting a finer point on that. And I'd say identifying those top scenarios and really pressure testing how that could impact their business plans and using that to start to refine the way they build their forecast and go to market and organize their group.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If this is something that really stood out for you, two things. Number one, leave a comment or review. Would really appreciate that. And secondly, share it with a colleague or friend who really needs to know more about the topics we cover on the Chemical Show. And as today's topic is, about risk and risk management and the things that they can do in their businesses. So thank you for joining us today. Keep listening, keep following, keep sharing, and we will talk with you again soon. Thanks for joining us today on the Chemical Show. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and most importantly, share it with your friends and colleagues. For more insights, visit thechemicalshow.com and connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find me at Victoria King Meyer on LinkedIn, and you can also find us at The Chemical Show Podcast. Join us next time for more conversations and strategies shaping the future of the industry. We'll see you soon.